Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Wide Open with Ashlyn Harris. Our guest today, I'm so excited. The one and only Krista Tippett. I could introduce you as a million different things, but you're really the guru of what I'm doing right now. I'm learning so much through the lens of your work. You're a master at conversation, your ability to show up and be so insightful and so thoughtful and so just sitting at the intersection of the human condition has been really beautiful to witness and to see from afar, and to be able to sit now and meet you. That's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
That means so much.
You now are podcasting on Being, which everyone clearly already knows. You have interviewed some of the most incredible people to ever walk this planet. So I can't wait to unpack that and how that inspires you, how that makes you move internally to grow and be better every single day based on the teachings of so many incredible people. And you're a New York Times bestseller. I mean, you really have done it all. And it's such an honor to have you on this show. So thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. As we were just talking about how a conversation is an adventure, and I've loved doing my show all these years. And you're new in this sphere, and I think I also now at this point really love being on both sides of the conversation. I just trust it as a human experience.
I was just going to ask you that. How does it feel now being on this side, people saying, hey, you know what? We want you on our show. I want to ask you the questions.
Well, actually, I think your job is harder, right? In some ways it's relaxing, because I think when you're hosting, which really is an act of hospitality, you're the one who had to prepare. You're the one who has notes. I just get to sit back and be surprised by what comes at me and then just kind of see what surfaces. And I do feel at this point like, and maybe you'll feel this way too at some point. I feel like, I've been doing this for over 20 years, but I feel like all the conversations that I've had are kind of in conversation with each other inside my head. So when I get asked a question, it's kind of like, a lot surfaces that is me, that is wisdom I have from others. And that's kind of interesting for me almost to observe.
Yeah, I think you have an incredible gift. I think you have an incredible gift to see people and meet them where they're at. I think not all people understand that, and the ability to listen with no judgment is very powerful and very rare these days. And I think more than ever, we need that. And I think it's so powerful and beautiful. We're able to do that through our work.
Yes.
And I have to say that in a time that feels so divided and so fragmented and so difficult and so siloed. It's so beautiful that you chose to come in here and to have a conversation like this as someone who looks up to you. And I hope one day to be in your shoes. I'm grateful to share oxygen with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I want to start weirdly kind of where you start. The beginning, the beginning of being raised in Oklahoma and centered around faith and religion and how that shaped you into making a lot of life decisions. And I'm curious who you were as a little girl and how you showed up in the spaces you did, and what made you curious? What made you excited about life?
Such a great way to ask the question. I'm in my 60s now. I love aging. Like, I love this decade.
Say that again. We need more women saying that.
I mean, life begins at 60.
Don't tell me that, though. Just again.
No, it's good. It just gets better.
Okay,
I'm also
good.
madly in love. I'm just so happy, having so much fun. So, and I say that because one of the interesting things for me about I don't want to say just living in my body living in the world a long time, which is another way to say aging, is that I have gotten to know that little girl me, and I've had to I've kind of learned to love her, and I was very hard on myself most of my life, which I think we kind of get trained to be in this culture. Really judgmental, and I realized at some point in recent years that, my little girl self was in a very imperfect world, as we all are, but really dealing with a lot. I was living in a place and in a family where there wasn't a lot of curiosity, and where the most important things that were going on, that of course I knew about because children know all the things the adults are trying to hide from them, we were not talking about. And so I think, sometimes people say to me, oh, you must have grown up in a family of great listeners. But, we get shaped in a few different ways, and you can get things because people taught them to you or modeled them for you. You can also get them because you longed for them because they were not there. And so when I look back at my young self, I think she was really asking a lot of big questions, and the questions the adults around her were not interested in. The only real books we read in my house were the Bible. I mean, the Bible was there, but there's a lot in the Bible. There's a lot in the Bible that nobody was talking about also. And so I just think I found, I found a lot of fuel for my imagination in what was given to me. I think a lot also now about how growing up in a small town, at that time, before the internet, you just didn't have a sense of the world out there. I didn't have a family that traveled. I hadn't really been any place but Texas. And I didn't really, those were the boundaries of the known world. So I was really 17, 18 before I started thinking about leaving. But when I left, I was really leaping into a void. I'd seen Woody Allen's movie Manhattan. That's that was the image I had of the city I now live in.
Wow.
I think I had a lot of. I think she was brave, my younger self, and I'm only in later life giving her credit for that. Wow. I don't know how weird that sounds because I didn't used to talk this way about my younger self,
and you should.
It's a new thing
because I am on the other side of the spectrum where I was that little girl who said I was going to be that professional athlete. I was going to be under those lights, and I dreamed about it. I imagined it. You won a Peabody. You have the humanitarian award from President Obama. Did you ever think you were capable of such greatness as a young little girl? Did you think and dream about those moments?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. I didn't have a sense of what was possible. But I was pretty fearless once I started going. The truth is, and I think this is also true for a lot of people, I still think I'm this kid from Oklahoma,
Yeah.
Those credentials somehow belong to me, and somehow I marvel at them too and don't know how to claim them.
It's so beautiful to, I'm sure, sit in the comfort of your own skin right now, because your journey was not linear. It wasn't. You came from a very religious background when you were being raised as a young girl, and you went after this journalism route and diplomacy and decide, you want to go to the Cold War in Berlin. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, but theology, and I want to go to all these incredible universities. Walk me through it.
Yeah. So there was an element for me of having a father I needed to impress. And, one of the wisest people I've known in my life who recently passed, he was 95, he would talk about the things that have happened to us as they're the negative negatives and they're the positive negatives. Now, you have to kind of have solid ground beneath your feet to say that thing that was so hard and hurtful actually shaped me in quite a beautiful way, right? Only because also at some point I knew to get distance from it and, as you say, become at home in myself and distinguish between what I did because I was trying to fulfill somebody else's bottomless, need, or doing things because they gave me life. So yeah, I think a lot of the things I did in my 20s, in a way I was trying to prove something, but not to the world. And it wasn't really about what I thought I could accomplish so much as justifying my existence. But I walked into so many, walked through so many incredible doors and learned so much that has served me ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really, really special. And you talk so much about purpose. How did you find your meaning in choosing to do this type of work? Because you're really serving the masses. So I'm curious what you felt in that time, because, your purpose changes through the different seasons of your life and your growth and where you're at. And did you think of that at a time when you were deciding what you wanted to do? Because so much of your work on being is really this beautiful intersection of the human condition, spirituality, ethics. Like, did you feel that at the time was like this really big purpose for you to fulfill, to connect people?
So in a not in a linear way, but in a roundabout way, over a few years, the experience I had in Berlin, led a very jagged line to doing that. I really believed, and I think this made me a good citizen of the late 20th century, mid 20th century, that politics was where it was at.
Yeah.
Right? This is where the power is. This is where the big hard questions are being asked. This is where the solutions are being worked out. And also, like, this is where, if you can engage, you will be helping save the world.
Yes.
Right? And I think, in some ways, weird circumstances led me to have this opportunity to go to divided Germany. But all of what I just said was playing itself out on this very, technicolor screen. It was a fault line of the world. But in Berlin, I got up close to real political power. My last couple of years there, I was the chief aide to our ambassador to West Germany, who was a nuclear arms expert. And those nuclear missiles, which were all over Europe, really were the existential threat of the time. And it's hard to think your way into this now, but we all lived knowing in some part of our brains that, they could go off one morning.
Yeah.
But I was also having the experience in Berlin, which was divided into two, and you had communism on one side and capitalism on the other, and people who were free on one side and people who were not free on the other, and people who had just basic choice about, not just what you would study in college or where you would live, but what color you would paint your room. And I saw how soul-stealing, how much we need choice. It was more that the possibility of possibility that was taken away from people. That very thing that I somehow knew to seize. And I got fascinated in Berlin because that division was really along the lines of the geopolitical division of the world. But I got fascinated by this human superpower of crafting a life. And I saw that on the Western side, where we, quote unquote, had everything, and were so free and had so much choice, it was possible to have a very superficial, empty life. And I saw on the Eastern side, where people had raw materials to work with that were, sparse.
Yeah.
They still could create this incredible intimacy and dignity and beauty. And I got fascinated with that, and I got discouraged and kind of very existentially confused that the guys, and it mostly was guys, who were moving the missiles around, were not just not addressing that, how we make a life. They were totally disinterested in it. And so, in this jagged line, it led me to go to seminary to think about theology as a place where we not only think about God, but about what it means to be human. I think when I started the show, which was really about 10 years later, I was trying to figure out what to do with all of that. But one of my motivations was that you shouldn't have to go away for 3 years, as I did, and go into a lot of debt, as I did, to get exposed to this really thrilling investigation, and to get exposed to theology, and to be pondering the big questions. And you shouldn't have to have a certain kind of education, or even a certain kind of religious education. And I also really felt like there were so many things. I'm just saying this for the first time in this way, but just as in my family, there's so many big things that we should be talking about, and we should be finding words for, even though words are, you really have to reach for words around a lot of this. And so, then this little, hour on public radio a week, which is what it was at first, was my offering.
I love that. Yeah. And I ask you this because you live such a purposeful life, and you ask such beautiful, intentional questions. Do you think purpose is found, or do you think it's created?
I think it's both, but that's just, there's a whole lineage of that question, right? Is light a particle or a wave? Yeah. It depends on what question you ask of it. I liked something you said a minute ago about, I don't think you used the word vocation, but you're saying we all, across our lifespan, like there are different ways that we're finding purpose, right? So I think the one thing that was wrong with this 20th century that we came out of is that it really collapsed the idea of purpose and vocation. Like vocation, which is really the word we've used in America for what your purpose is, and it's really about what you do for a living.
Yes.
It's how you succeed. It's what you get paid for. And that is really impoverishing. And, you have small children. I mean, at a time in your life, you also there are other things about you. But I think, like, we all go through stages where, when you are a parent of young children, that is your primary vocation. And everything else has to orbit around that.
Yes.
And I just think what we're called to, because vocation, that word vocation comes from the word, for calling, to call forth. And that's important language to me now in this world we live in, because I think we're called, that's a question we need to be asking. And it's a way to turn the question of how can I possibly stand before all this crisis and rupture? What are we being called to do? So I guess this is a long-winded way to say, I think we all have so much agency and so much possibility, and there's so many ways also we know that gets stolen from people. And yet a miraculous thing about human beings is that we often are made by what would break us. And so I think purpose is always a possibility, and it can take so many forms.
Yes.
I guess something that to me is a mystery that I will not know the answer to in this lifetime is, are there? I wonder what the range of possibility is. There are at least this point in my life when I've lived over 6 decades. I wonder if I had walked down that road, maybe that would have been just as purposeful a life, but it would have been very different, Or is there something, are there best ways forward, and we find them, or we we orient towards them or not. I don't know. But I'm fascinated. Annie Dillard, the writer, said something that has always stuck with me, that she said, we are made and set here, something like to be astonished. And I feel like we all get astonished at different things,
Yes.
right? And that is a joyful purposefulness when we follow our astonishment.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I think that can go in so many directions, and some of them that will in fact be our purpose, we will not get paid for, right? But they will make life worth living.
Yes.
And so I think that's the trap. And I get nervous. And I think in this world that we're heading into, even more so, about, that everybody needs to find meaningful work, which means that the work itself is what's going to give your life meaning. For some of us are really fortunate to have work that in and of itself, its very nature gives us meaning. But that's a trap.
Yeah.
If, working to earn money to put food on the table for your children, that's purposeful too. So I'm kind of, I always struggle with this a little bit.
It's so true. I really invest in growth. And it's interesting because a lot of your work in terms of becoming versus being is a really interesting intersection for me. And I'm in a new season of my life as I've newly retired from professional sports, 2 very young kids, and recently, went through a hard divorce and finding new meaning and joy in my life. And I'm going through a lot of coaching and a lot of therapy and a lot of growing. And it's such a beautiful season to be in. And I don't look at it as a scary thing. I think life is moving so fast and we have to continue to evolve. And I constantly want to hold myself accountable in terms of self-awareness of how I show up and how I serve. And I had a coaching session yesterday, and my coach asked me what anchors me. Because so often we float away, and if we get too close to the sun, we start to burn. Or if we get too far away from the buoy, we don't have anything in sight that grounds us. And the tide is always rising, right? It's always changing. And it was really interesting that my anchor is really what grounds me the most when I'm at my most happiest state is when I'm with my partner and I'm with my children. Those are my anchors. Home to me is not a place. It is the people in which I find most at ease and peace with. And it is them. They are my why. But for me to do all the other things, I have to provide. So it's this really interesting complex of finding purpose and meaning outside of my anchors. But also that's okay. I do find that my work is very meaningful. Human connection to me is very meaningful. But you're right, not all the time does it pay the bills.
I'm thinking as you're talking about, the Rumi, the mystic, Muslim mystic and poet, he created the whirling dervishes. And the point of that was, spiritual practice that helps us stay still inside while whirling. And I was just thinking about that this week because I think that is actually one of the things we are all called to right now in this moment of time where the world is one big whirl.
And it is.
So what you're talking about, is getting grounded. Is that still point. And there may be you maybe have a lot of plates up in the air around that, right? But maybe that's a good way to think about what does it mean to find purpose in life. It's not necessarily that this thing or that thing is giving you purpose, but are you staying still while whirling and able to take joy?
I'm in the process of learning that. I'm curious of what your relationship is now in this season of life. What is your relationship to religion?
Well, it's complicated. I feel like there have been so many chapters.
That's why I say in this chapter. Because
absolutely.
we do have different chapters.
There's such a false and misleading, cultural fight that isn't really representative of science or religion, that, that religion is somehow opposed to evolution. But I like to think faith is the most evolutionary thing of all, right? Like if you are breathing, even if your whole life long, you could say from year 1 to year 90, I believe in God. If you are having a life, what that sentence means, what it's filled with, is going to be so radically dynamic. And so I don't know, in terms of that one sentence, I just think for me the word God is just so small. I grew up with a religiosity that had so much fear in it. Like the world was such a dangerous place. The body was an entry point to danger. Everything was a slippery slope to sex.
Yes.
And one of the things I realize, looking back, is how little a sense of mystery and a reverence for mystery there was, because if it's all fear and if it's all rules, and it wasn't only that. Like my grandfather especially was, the most, he preached hellfire and brimstone, and he was the most loving, funny person I knew. And I actually think that experience of that complexity was really a great thing to take in. So, yeah, I think now, for me, as I've grown older, and through my conversations, and a lot through my conversations with physicists, with scientists who, paradoxically have a great, not just a comfort with mystery, but a delight in it. They're always looking for, living. One time early on, this interview really imprinted me. It was really early, with this geneticist who was also an Anglican priest. Wow. And he said to me that the spirituality of the scientist is like the spirituality of a mystic. That the mystic and the scientist are both, they both accept and are thrilled by the knowledge that there are things we will never understand in this lifetime. And they're always moving into that mystery deeper and deeper, and they don't expect to tie it up, because then the fun would be gone. And yet they are they're both looking for truth. And I do think, we are called, all of us, to kind of discern truth as best we can, but then also to keep living and letting our questions come into those answers we have. And so I think for me now, it's, I was raised Southern Baptist. I spent about 10 years not religious at all. I became Episcopalian. I think that got me in touch with the church across time and space, and religion across time and space. Like the church I grew up in, everything was private and personal, and you're praying in your head all alone, which is such an American thing. Yeah. And to have this experience that is the experience of so many people, and certainly in a tradition like Judaism or Islam, where you are saying words, the same words that other people have said before you for thousands of years. I learned to really, have a reverence for that, to find that a sacred thing. And I think that also helped me be empathic about the deep religiosity of religious others, and really, find that very beautiful. At this point, it's very open for me. It's very expansive.
And it's so personal.
I think it's something I've come to think about. For a long time, I had kind of ambivalence about Christianity. I've come to understand it is my mother tongue, like it is my spiritual homeland, and not to take that lightly. So for a long time, I meditated, and I've interviewed so many of the great Buddhist teachers, and I'm very formed by that tradition and its spiritual technologies and its wisdom. But at some point, I realized, I also needed to be praying, because that's what I learned how to do. And I do think there are forms of religious practice and spiritual practice. I do think it's very much like we find what is suited to us. I mean, it's almost a little bit like the sport we do or like yoga. I mean, I think there's so many different, right? Yeah. And you have to find the one, the postures and the pace,
yes,
the kind of challenge or restoration or whatever it is that you need. And I kind of think that spiritual ritual is like that too.
And I do think, as you talk about that, I can't help but to think travel is our greatest teacher.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. Like, coming from such a small town, and I too grew up on a military base, and both of my grandparents were very successful in the Air Force, and we lived right by Kennedy Space Center, and I was very much so a NASA baby. And and my parents didn't enjoy the travel and the constant change of schools and the different cultures. I mean, my father was like Mobile, Alabama to Birmingham to Arkansas to Hawaii, and my mom was Germany and Spain and all these places, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And I became a very good soccer player, and I did feel like I was able to see the world through the lens of what there was culture outside of the Western culture. And truthfully, it's why I love soccer so much. It's everyone shows up and you don't even speak the same language, but the joy and love for the game and the atmosphere of being connected to people. That's the beauty of sport. It's not the game. It's the connection.
And I think soccer has that.
Oh, yeah.
In it to a special
it's
degree.
Universal. The language. It's just the connection piece is so important. And not to get a little off topic, but when you were just talking, it's really important to me because you talk about this often, about a big defining moment in your life was really realizing your family was terrible listeners.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to directly quote you, but you really do talk about listening as such an act of love. How did you become such a great listener? How did you create a space where people feel so comfortable to tell you things they might otherwise not feel safe sharing?
Probably part of it, like you, is that I just find the world and human beings so fascinating and so bizarre and surprising. And the closer you look, the harder you look, the more surprising it is, and the more is unexpected. I also am empathic. I don't know if people talked that way when I was growing up. I mean, I think we now know that is a thing. Did you happen to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation?
I did not.
No, but do you know about the ship's counselor, Deanna Troi?
I do not, but please share.
All right. Well, she was an empath.
Okay.
She's half betazoid, which is a race of empaths. And so once I saw that, I realized that I joke about this with people who say, "Oh, I'm half betazoid after all." But I think, any kind of gift like this is something that you can lose if you don't engage it. But, and let me just, I think also growing up with my father in particular, who was just really broken and really deep down sad and troubled, and wouldn't. I think that I spent a lot of my childhood. I think this is true of other, sort of children sometimes, of, trying to intuit what he couldn't say, and probably developing that muscle. Feeling things other people are feeling, and then being able to honor that and lean into that and turn it into a conversation. I think listening, like I learned growing up that listening was being quiet while the other person said what they had to say. So then it would be my turn.
Yeah.
And I really think that listening, I think that the being quiet part is a byproduct. I think listening is of course I've learned to be a better listener. I mean, anything we do repetitively, we get better at. But it's really about following. It's about treating the muscle of curiosity, and it's about being present with your curiosity to the other person. And for me, that is second nature, and I've flexed those muscles for a long time. I think they are basic social arts. They are basic human capacities. However, they kind of get educated out of us in this world. We're really trained to be advocates and to have strong opinions and to be good in arguments and to be presentational. And those things have their place. But we're not all they kind of work against showing up with another person and truly being curious, which means I may know something about you, right? I may know something about your identity, or I may be looking at you and making observations. I may know who you voted for, right? I may know something about, some identity you have, some skill you have. But I know that one thing, that there's so much more to you. And I want you to surprise me. And in this culture, I think we have these ideas, we latch on to the one thing we know, and we have an opinion about that. And we don't imagine how complicated and fascinating, and how much that other person will probably defy a lot of what we would expect, unless we really move towards them.
It's so interesting that you say that, especially right now with the political landscape and climate. I haven't lived a lot of decades, but this is the first one of my lifetime where I feel like it's really scary.
Yeah.
It's the first time I do feel scared to raise two Black, my children are Black and brown, and I'm a queer woman in this country. I'm scared.
Yeah.
And I show up in the spaces I can and always choose love. It's the greatest asset and gift I can give to the universe, and it's completely free. Yeah. And I'm curious, for someone who has spent a lifetime technically in politics and journalism, what do you think about the current landscape of what's going on in journalism and media and politics and religion? Like, there's just so much divide. I'm curious of how you pour more into your work because of it.
First of all, I think everything that's happening now, we have been walking into it for a long time in all kinds of ways, and not wanting to deal with the things we would have needed to deal with. But when I analyze this world through the human condition, I think fear is running the show to such an extent that all the things we want to take seriously and that actually we wanted to think will protect us and keep order in place, like politics and the economy, these are just symptoms. If, living out of a fear place means and also in these 30, 40 years, we've learned so much about what fear does in a human body. It just collapses your ability to think clearly, to think deeply. It kind of collapses our range of our sense of our agency to three things: fight, deny, or bury your head in the sand. And that is a pretty good way to analyze what we're doing.
Yes.
What's happening in all, we have these reckonings. We do have these big reckonings, callings. in this century, in this generation of our species, that are, are ecological, I think most existentially, but also racial, social, like we're redefining marriage and family and gender. What a huge thing to be the gender. Like if that were the only thing that were happening right now, this would still be really big.
Yeah.
And we'd be tending to it better. And then I think, we don't, because we have this tendency, we have this drive, which I know also probably keeps us sane, to normalize. We came out of these 3 years of global pandemic in which everybody's nervous system was stuck on high for years. We were also deprived of the very thing that helps us calm down, which is proximity to other human beings. And so when I look at the world right now, I see a distressed, dysregulated nervous system at a species level, not just in our individual bodies, but in our collective body. That doesn't make anything simpler.
That's so true.
But I wonder,
thought of it that way.
My question is, and I think this is what I'm going to spend the next however many years I have left to be, really engaged. Like, let's also work directly on that. If it's the human heart and human bodies and human well-being, that all of this fracture, and as you say, like hatred and anger and hatred and violence are fear and pain metastasized, right? They're just extreme expressions of this very primal feeling. And we don't have a society in particular where people feel safe or are safe really to say, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Right? Instead to say, I'm angry, I want this, I'm going to fight for that, I'm going to vote for this person. That feels like strength. But we are going to have to open space, and I like your loving space. Love is a muscle, right? I mean, love is the most reliable muscle of human transformation. It's the only thing as powerful in a human body as fear. So that's what I see, and that's how I'm trying to think about what's the space I want to move in. And it needs all of us with all of our, everybody is going to have a different focus and a different sense of where to direct their agency.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's so profound and it's so powerful. And I do feel that we've just lost sight of so many of the things that really matter. And the human condition definitely is one of them. And I'm curious because you've created On Being and you have interviewed some of the most exceptional people ever. How did you prepare? I'm curious of how you got to that level of sitting down with some of the most exceptional people and just absolutely having breakthrough conversation after breakthrough. How'd you do this?
Yeah. Well, so I think that the empathic gift is probably is the gift part of it. But then, yes, there's a huge amount of preparation. Now, what I will say that's exciting is because previously, before I did this show, I was somebody who would do something for 2 or 3 years and then do something else for 2 or 3 years. And I have learned the beauty of doing something for a long span of time. And one of the beautiful things is you just get better at it, right? So I became really aware in the last few years, just in particular, that I felt my preparation, the quality of it was as good. You also just get a sense of relax. I knew what I was doing, even though there's always that edge, which is good for, I think helps us, yes. Right? But still, I knew what I was doing. And I realized that I could do the same quality of preparation in a fraction of the time. So that's a little bit mysterious, but we know that's true in other fields as well. I'm going to use another Star Trek analogy.
Oh yes, keep them coming. Now I'm going to go home and watch it.
Well, I don't think it stood the test of time, but there were some great lessons for life. So in the early Star Trek, which is pretty cheesy, there's the Vulcan, Dr. Spock, which you've heard of Spock, right? You're a
I
Spock.
sure have.
Okay. So he would do this thing that the Vulcans did, which was called the Vulcan mind meld. It's like there's the laying on of hands, but it's basically my mind to your thoughts to my thoughts.
Yeah.
And there would be kind of this telepathic thing going on. But what I don't know when that image came to me. I'm not sure I was directly inspired by it, but I always felt like, because the internet does make incredible preparation possible, overwhelmingly. But what I would do is kind of try to immerse in, as you've done with me, other interviews, things people have written, what is knowable, and kind of feel like it was like. I think the thing that I did that maybe is a little bit different, or just a way that what I wanted to do was not just know what people know, but how they think. So that I would be asking questions that would be interesting to them, which are going to be more enjoyable for them to kind of get lost in answering, so that they forget that they're answering a question and we're having a conversation. I think also I learned over time, and I feel like you're doing this too, a conversation is different from an interview.
Yes.
So yes, I'm the one who comes with a kind of roadmap of questions, and I'm hosting. It's an act of hospitality, which is a social technology for inviting people to be their best selves. But also, if it's a conversation, I'm going to have reactions to what you're saying, and I'm going to share something about me, right? Because just when you told me a minute ago where you came from, I just decided I'm okay. I know I'm not supposed to be the one asking you what I was going to ask you just then.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? So, and then I think the other thing that happens if you get into that flow of a real exchange, then everybody forgets that it's, you forget you're being interviewed. And I think the measure of a successful conversation is if the person I'm talking to puts words around something, in this place that they've never quite put words around in that way before. And I've certainly done that in this hour. And then the magic of technology is that when whoever presses play on this episode, and it may be years from now, it's time travel, because they are like in the room with us. They hear me in the moment put words around something in a way I never have before.
Yeah.
And that's magic.
It really is. And
that's like the mystery of us reaching across each other.
And the mystery is you have no idea where the conversation is going to go, but that's the beauty of it.
And you trust that.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, you trust it, and it's scary, and it's risky. It's a safari.
Well, I do, this question that keeps coming to me right now is, like, you really have spent your whole life exploring the big questions of life, the really impactful questions. What do you think is the big question you're still trying to answer for yourself at this age?
At this age, so I had to decide that I got to not that joy and pleasure and play were not optional. I like, really for years there, and I was pretty much single parenting. I drove myself to exhaustion again and again and again, and that's not what I was transmitting to other people, right? So, but I am actually now in a whole new chapter, and one of the things that has been fascinating in my lifetime. And I want to say this too, there's so much we can look around ourselves and just wring our hands and whatever, beat our breasts or all this. there's also so much that is just magnificent. There's so much learning. There's so much breakthrough, beautiful science, what we're learning about the natural world, what we're learning about the cosmos, what we're learning about our bodies and our brains. I went to a conference in Iceland 2 weeks ago on this incredible research about psychedelically assisted therapies.
Yes.
I mean, we are on the cusp of actually being able to work with our consciousness.
Yes.
So I just set myself up. Yeah. So, one of the fascinating things of my lifetime has been the evolution of aging, because I'm 64, and this is not what 64 was when I was growing up, or even when I think I was 30 or 40, like just in this 20-year span. I think aging has become very relative to who you are and how you live and just how you think about it. But I am embarking on this whole new chapter. And it might be as long as the chapter I just went through starting the show. And that's new, right? Like to be living with this kind of evolution is wonderful. So I mean, I'm actually at a place I was at 23 again. Wow. I mean, I have more ideas. I know what I know. There are also doors that have closed, and I'm totally at peace with that. You know, when you're 23, you kind of think, well, I could go to medical school and become a doctor. You know what I mean? And it's actually kind of a relief to not have all those options. And also, I'm fortunate that I don't have big regrets. I don't feel like, I feel like I walked a path that was
when you
fruitful.
know you've really lived.
Yeah. But I'm asking, with the same kind of sense of expectancy and not knowing, like, how I can be of service in this world, that I was asking, when I was in my early 30s, when I started, or mid-30s, mid to late 30s, when I started thinking about, what became on being. And I'm asking it in such a different world where we've been stripped of a lot of the illusions that we had about just how everything was going to be up, up, up. And we had defied the laws of physics, and sure, we still had a few problems, but we were always getting better, right?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, these basic forms like schools and education and medicine and politics and the law and prisons and all, and again, marriage and family and gender, those forms aren't fit for purpose. So we're also, I think this is another reason that our nervous systems are distressed, because it is actually a stressful thing to be in a time when so much is breaking, some of which needs to break, or some of which wasn't working, a lot of which wasn't working. But also where we're in the time where we can see we can see the forms that don't work, we can see what's breaking. We're the ones who have to start remaking everything.
Brick by brick.
And so that's, and also I think whatever any of us takes on now, in terms of our sense of purpose, not necessarily the particular activities, is the work of the rest of our lifetimes, right? Because everything that's with us now is civilizational. And so that's interesting too, in some ways, to be asking some of the same questions I was asking at the beginning of my adult life, but in such a different context.
Yes.
And, right now, a lot of what I'm doing is off mic. I'm doing conversations with small groups of people because there are, again, these deep, deep things we need to talk about and things we need to say out loud, and we can't say them in public. But we have to do that. We have to do that work because we are walking towards the beyond of this.
I love that. That's such a incredible way to put it. I guess the last question I really have, and it's a question that I ask every guest on this show. What moment in your life really split you wide open that changed everything? That made you either question, rethink, alter the way you move in the world? Like, what was that one moment for you that changed it all?
I feel like if I thought about it long enough, there are probably a few. But the one that is probably most obvious that comes to mind is in my mid-30s, I had a really big depression, like a really big clinical depression. And it was it was the time that I finally kind of told myself the truth about all that stuff in my family that I talked about. Because, well, you know, I had you normalize, right?
Yeah.
And I really wasn't quite owning. I wasn't owning the truth. And also just the ways, and this is what we do, right? The ways I had shaped myself around that dysfunction and that pain of someone else, and around not telling the whole story. And so, I mean, this was, you know, it was a really major depression, and it, you know, I had all the physical symptoms, and at some point, you know, just went to bed and could not imagine. It's not, I think, in that kind of depression, it's not that you can't imagine the future, it's that you can't imagine imagining the future, right?
Yeah.
I do remember a day, my daughter was really young. I remember a day when I came downstairs and she looked at me and said, "Mommy, you look so sad." And in that moment, I knew I had to get better, you know? But the thing is, it forced me into this odyssey of self-knowledge that I had not wanted to do. And it was a slow climb out. But I don't think I could have done everything I've done since if I hadn't had that crash. And right, that's also a mystery of us. And it's always with me. I mean, I'm fortunate because a lot of times when people have had an experience like that, it's something that comes back, and it could come back. And we did a show called The Soul and Depression in the early years, and it was almost like that was a little piece of therapy for me, walking myself through it. It was really scary. That whole thing felt terrifying just to walk. And I lived for a long time feeling better, but feeling like I knew there was this abyss and it was over here somewhere. And it could happen one day that I just woke up and happened to be standing right by it, you know, that I could fall into it again. Now, I don't live that way anymore. But I know how profoundly shaped I am by that experience. And so it's like not something that you would wish on anyone or some equivalent of this. It's not even something I would wish on myself, but I have to be so grateful for it. And I have to be grateful for myself at that age, who took it on as a, you know, I don't want to say a fight, like took it on as a calling to learn everything I could and stayed with that. And here I am.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I feel that in my bones, because this has been a healing journey for me as well. I'm so grateful for your vulnerability and to share this beautiful conversation. I told you when you first got here, my partner, Sophia, is just in awe of you, and I can see why. You have a beautiful spirit and soul, and I'm grateful for your work and your time today. And I hope this is one of many more conversations we can have together. And thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you're on a beautiful and brave path. I'm really impressed. And yeah, blessings to you. And yes, I'd love to keep talking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Krista, for being here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in for another week of Wide Open. We'll see you next time.